What the fuck is gender dysphoria?
Well,
I don't think it's real. I'm not crazy.
Well,
None of my views
I'm saying
are
there
even
are extremes on both sides, and I would say that yes, to say that gender dysphoria doesn't even exist, you don't think that that's extreme to say it doesn't even exist? Our understanding of most mental illnesses.
It's a debate. I think it's a debate whether or not BPD exists.
See,
or
you
not
keep
in their
saying
soul.
In their soul, and
Because
I don't care about the soul so much. I'm talking about biological characteristics. See, you say actually, and that's what I'm saying is what you are communicating is what is actual. That is the thing. What you communicate is what it actually means.
You are still supposed to, or not supposed to, but of the nature.
That is what you're saying. You're saying you ought to have this thing, and therefore what follows is that they would create eggs.
That is a biological reality.
This is just cope. This is pure cope.
No, you don't understand this for some reason.
I
and it's
understand what you're saying, but it means that you're just inconsistent on your definition. That's all that means.
That's not inconsistent.
Do I call you Lav or Phemoid?
You can call me whatever. My name's Leah. Or you call me Lav, or Phemoid, yeah, you can call me anything. Phemoid, Femroid. People have been calling me Femroid. That one's pretty good.
Femoroid?
Yeah.
Sounds horrible.
Yeah, I like it though.
Okay, so I wanted to talk to you about gender because I guess we've talking about gender for probably like 6 months now, maybe.
Yeah.
Ever since I think you talked to Destiny about it one time, and then I tried reaching out afterwards. So
my thoughts have changed a lot since then.
Okay.
Since I talked to Steven about it, like a lot. I used to think that non-binary wasn't valid, and that all the other ones were. And now I think that no trans identity is valid except for non-binary. So yeah, that's a complete 180.
Okay. Well, then, do you mind if I ask you some questions?
Totally. Let's do it.
And then we can kind of figure out where we want to go from there.
Totally.
Okay. So, is gender a thing?
What does a thing mean? Does gender, should we give gender merit? No. Has gender existed in the zeitgeist? Yes.
Okay. So, you mean it exists as some sort of social construct that just probably shouldn't?
Yes.
Okay.
Or at least not in the framing that it is now. I think that if gender is going to exist, it ought to mean something like masculine or feminine for the time being, and it should never mean woman or man.
Okay. So yeah, I'll go ahead so that it's not just so one-sided. I'll go ahead and tell you what my answers are to these as well. I don't think we can abolish gender. I think that it's something that's fairly innate within us, and so I think that it's not I think it's pretty hardcore attached to our sex. So that's okay. So then that you kind of answered my next question, which was does gender attach to the word woman or man?
I think that it ought to not. Besides, certain things when it comes to things that directly correlate with biology, sure. If you are more maternal and you are someone who has a uterus, it would make sense for maternal to be a gendered experience, right? More so than your sexual counterpart, the male sexual counterpart. But I still don't think that means that it doesn't make you any more woman-like to be a man who experiences something maternal. Spoon, I will kill you. Don't tell Zonia. I'm about to kill my dog.
Okay. Let's see. And then, is there an internal experience of gender?
No. At least not what we think of as gender today. I think that there's an internal experience of your personality.
Okay.
But I don't believe that it's gender.
So then, what is gender?
I believe that gender was supposed to be a social science that talked about it was supposed to study this experience that we have of a soul, basically. It's old religious scientists trying to understand if we have soul connections, if they're related to our biology, and so on. And then John Money basically used it as a tool to assert that women actually liked being in the kitchen and liked being subservient to men, and that was just their gender. It was just their internal experience. It was just sort of I believe it's sort of like a psyop. Like I don't think that I think it's not a direct science. It's there's no empirical way to prove gender. It's sort of just like a theory. It's a theology that implies a soul, and it should be completely thrown out within secular science.
Okay. Oh yeah, I said that I would answer them too. So, like the way that I think of gender is there are differences between males and females, and gender is the way that we categorize those differences within masculinity and femininity. And that some of those differences are like biologically, like they're biological differences because of like chromosomes or gametes or whatever. And then some of them are like socially constructed things that are just like pushed onto us, like whether or not you wear a dress or carry a purse or, stuff like that. But over time, they're just patterns that we've recognized that are more common from one sex than the other. And
Sure.
so
you think that that's innate?
I would say that some of it is innate. Yes. I think that like
how much of it would you say?
I don't think that I can say how much. I don't think that so one of the things that I study is communication differences. And I feel like it's pretty obvious that men and women both not only communicate differently, but the way that they process what the other person is saying is very different as
Certainly.
well. And so if that's the case, it seems to be that there are very different ways in the way that we think of information, that we intake data, and the way that we process it and externalize it as well.
Sure.
So I think this would be a good place to start, is like, yeah, what is gender and how do we categorize it? Is that okay?
Sure. Yeah, to what you were just saying, I think that I think most of it is socialization. I think most of what gender is imposed on us. I think most of what gender is are gender roles, and I think that most progressive people would say that they were against gender roles, but all of a sudden, when you put the backing of, if people don't get to experience these gender roles, they're going to kill themselves. There's like this whole new gravity to the situation, which otherwise is sort of just like up in the air. Like we have so many more questions than we do answers about gender. And as a theology, I think it's great to understand and to talk about. But yeah, overall, I just think that I wonder how much this is going to divulge into. I don't know. I don't know. I'm known for being pretty transphobic these days, so I hope that I don't know if you're streaming this on Twitch, but I'd be weary.
I am not streaming on Twitch. I am also banned on Twitch.
So. Nice. Okay. Yeah. Good. Good, because I got banned from Twitch for 2 weeks for saying that woman wasn't a feeling. So, and that's it. Didn't even call anyone a tranny. Didn't do any of that.
You're assuming that, right? The Twitch doesn't tell you why you got banned, but you're assuming that was the statement.
They do.
Really? They didn't tell me.
Oh, I wonder if you.
They didn't tell Max. They didn't tell Steven. They didn't tell any of us.
Oh, they said it was like hate towards a community or something.
Okay, yes, they tell you like what it is that you violated, but they don't tell you what you did or said.
I know the direct moment. I was streaming with Irrelevant and we were talking about gender, and then right after I got banned, his whole chat lit up with like, "We got the transphobe." So I think I probably have a better guess.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so you mentioned John Money. I think that the story of John Money, I also don't believe in like self-ID. I think that it's a ridiculous thing and it doesn't make sense. Sure. But I think the story that John Money gives us is a story of somebody who isn't what we would call trans, isn't like a person who, like the kid who had the problems with their genitals. They end up being treated as a girl and develop gender dysphoria because they're not being treated as the gender that they actually are. And so it's a story that shows us that it's not just people who have the mental illness gender dysphoria, but it's anybody who is not being treated as the gender that they are internally. They will experience gender dysphoria afterwards.
Sure. Well, I would go. I think there are a couple things going on, especially with John Money's experience. I think that one thing is that we know John Money was unethical in his practices. We know that his controls were kind of rubbish, and we know that also he like made these children basically touch each other and engage in sexual activity with each other, which would traumatize anyone. So saying that it's just this gender treatment that made this child grow up to kill themselves or grow up to be depressed, I think is.
I want to be clear, that's not what I'm saying.
Sure, I'm just saying it's so hard to. I take every experiment that John Money did with a complete grain of salt, because I just think that his practices were completely unethical, and they also, like I said, had like poor controls, so there's not any way to know that that's for sure what was going on.
Yeah,
I don't know, when we talk about how many children, when we talk about children, especially with gender, I think it's also important to bring up how many children believe that they are gender nonconforming. And I don't know, you're probably familiar with with the controversial studies about how many children desist from being trans as they age.
This is actually where I was getting ready to go, is that current desist rates is one thing, and I think that it's a good thing that we have those high desist rates, because it means that like our processes are working to make sure that somebody.
Well, those aren't our desist rates. So our desist rates are actually a study just released last year in November, I believe, where they tested where they tracked youth over 5 years, and 80% of those, or more than 80% of those kids over 5 years, did not desist in America, but that's only a 5-year span. So when you think about
but they did it very differently. Like the way that they calculated whether or not you desisted was very different from the first one that you mentioned. They were automatically thought to have gender dysphoria just by going and seeking the treatment.
Well, so
and this one did not see it that way.
Yes, well that's another thing that we have to talk about, which is what the fuck is gender dysphoria. I don't think it's real.
Well, so that's where I was going with the with the John Money story. The kid. So you're right on like the fact that like it was a horribly unethical treatment, that everything that happened with John Money was horrible. I do not stand this guy at all. But we have testimony from both the parents and the doctors and other people around that the kid who we're talking about had a strong preference for masculine things and a strong rejection for feminine things. And these are kind of like the things that we would use to see if somebody has gender dysphoria, and that kid still like ticked off every box that we would use these days to decide whether or not someone has it.
I just think that a lot of kids are gender nonconforming, though, and I would say that there are a lot of. I mean, this kid could have grown up to be gay, right? Like that's a lot of what like the gays against, the LGB who are against the whole like trans movement are very much like, yeah, I was this person, I rejected everything I was supposed to do, and most gender nonconforming kids grow up to be gay. So I don't know. I just don't know if we would have known if that one boy grew up to be. I don't know.
David Reimer, I believe he died like at 27 or something like that, didn't he? So he did grow up. We know who he turned into.
Yes, I just think it's so many things, though, because I think especially when there's that much emphasis on your gender, it's just gonna fuck you up. I just, like I said, the control's not there. Like this kid was in therapy being, monitored by professionals, psychiatrists, his parents, even under a microscope, which would give any kid a complex about anything, which is why I'm like, I think a better control if we were to do an experiment with like something like this would just be to let the kid without being under a microscope just exist. But obviously I don't know if that's ethical to do. But
based on how we understand it, it doesn't seem as though the therapy and asking them questions would actually change it. But I guess based on like the way you think about it, that might make a big difference. So so I guess what I was trying to say is that the kid, even yes, we have high desist rates, yes, we have desist rates that I think is like a testament to having good processes to make sure that somebody doesn't have dysphoria before they start medically transitioning.
Well, America doesn't, but the Nordic model is is better for sure.
I will say, like, there's few states that have a bad system. So like California sucks. Like, they are horrible, and they
Oregon's
have
the
like
worst.
really big problems. But
Yeah.
we only have like a 1% detransition rate afterwards. And so
This is another thing I got to push on this, because people say that, but also we know for a fact that the people who are going into these clinics are not being kept up with. So this is all self-reports for people who are trans activists, for people who are, you know, doing all these things. If you go on the detransitioner Reddit page, for example, there's there's 100,000 of detransitioners. That doesn't make sense with the amount of detransitioners we have in these self-report studies. Like, it doesn't make sense. Every day on Twitter, every day on YouTube, every week you look up detransitioner. Some other woman is coming forward saying, I got hormones too early. I'm not actually a man. I mean, it's happening at such alarming rates. I don't trust these numbers. I just don't trust these numbers. And I know that that's a little conspiratorial.
That's a lot of people. Like, we don't have a lot of trans people. 8,000 people in this one study getting their self-reports. What else are they supposed to do? Go check and see if they actually look different than what we would imagine if they didn't detransition?
No, I would say that it should be, by law, you should have to keep up with your patients, and not just because a lot of people just go to the clinic, get their hormones or get their top surgery, and then never talk to these doctors again, like, ever.
Sure, but that's very different as to whether or not we believe they detransitioned, right?
But we don't know whether or not they did.
Well, we would only know by asking them, right? Like,
sure, and you can ask. You can ask on Twitter, and you can ask through Reddit, and there, like I said, there's this 1% doesn't make any fucking sense if on Reddit there are literally tens of thousands of detransitioners that are like, I'm from America, I don't know what the fuck happened to me. So it's not like, I think that these numbers
there was only one group that they got it from, but
I don't think it's most trans people. Sure, I don't think it's. Let me clarify that I don't think it's most trans people who detransition. But I do think it is. I think I'd probably say, if I had to estimate, it's closer to 15-20% of people, trans people.
Goodness.
And I think less for males. Males tend to detransition less. I think that females detransition more. That's what we see, at least in the trends, of people who are coming forward opposing these things. And it's usually young women, and it's usually young women with autism. But yeah, I just don't believe these numbers. I think it's a fucking. I'm usually not conspiratorial, but I just think this whole thing's a psyop for some agenda, and I don't know what it is. But
you realize, though, that it's really hard for me to engage with you.
Sure.
On this, if like I can't actually use the numbers that are there, and we just have to like assume that there might be some like ooga booga numbers out there somewhere that we just don't see.
Sure, I completely understand that. I think it's important to acknowledge that it could not be accurate.
I agree with that, and I'm like totally open. So this is one of the frustrations that I have with trans activists, is they feel like we found the solution and that's it, and like we're good. And I like, if we found something else that was actually better at like relieving dysphoria, then I would be totally cool with that, and that would be the new thing that we should advocate for. And like, the treatments for dysphoria have changed over and over throughout history, and this is the very new thing that we're using for dysphoric people. And so I'm totally open to this being
gender affirming
transitioning care? Yes, gender affirming care.
This has actually been the standard since the 1920s, so it's not very new.
The standard, the standard, like the APA has only recently used this as the standard. The like American organizations, major medical organizations, have only recently started to use this as a standard, like since like the 50s, I want to say.
I think now it's in diagnostic toolbooks, sure. But before this, before anyone had written any diagnostic toolbook on transgenderism, because it was such a small group, it had always been since the 1920s. I mean, you watched the movie The Danish Girl, which is actually based on a real trans woman. And, in the UK, they were in the late 1800s to the early 1900s doing this, giving women breasts and trying to invert penises, and no one has ever really, I mean, there's been small sects of the community who've tried to do like conversion therapy, of course, but I think overall this has really been like a scientific marvel, and they really have tried to be like, I think most people are trying to also prove like if the soul exists. So they're like, okay, if you really are a woman in your soul, whatever the fuck that means, let's give you a vagina. And this has sort of been the standard of care, is just sort of trying to alleviate symptoms of dysphoria. Although gender affirming care as a diagnostic tool patented is a little new, yes.
Yeah, again, I want to be clear. I'm not talking about a soul. I think there's biological differences between males and females.
You have to be talking about a
differently.
soul when people talk about gender or gender ideology, you have to be talking about a soul. Because
Why?
I don't think that anyone would disagree with you. Any normal person with an IQ above 110 would disagree with you that there are certain things that evolutionarily women would have traits of more commonly, right? Like being maternal or being more even empathetic. I know that, our hormones, we smell more, we see more colors, we feel more. There are those things that are like, they are innate and they are evolutionary. Or the same thing with a man. He's more strong, more brute force, more compartmentalized in the brain. We know that these things are true.
Mm-hmm.
But every personality or every gender expression plots completely normal distribution on a bell curve. So when people talk to me about gender and they explain gender as like, well, I want to wear a dress and makeup and I've always liked shoes and you're a man, I'm like, okay, just be a man who likes these things. Just be a feminine man.
Yeah.
There's no utility, and quite the opposite from a feminist perspective, to say that liking those things or to having a feminine personality makes you a woman.
Yeah, but you're talking about something different when you're talking about whether or not gendered expectations are an okay thing versus whether or not gender is a biological thing. Those are two very different things, right?
Sure, but when people talk about gender, they're not talking about biological things. They're not talking about the innate things that are in our brain or our
I just
bodies.
want to be clear again. I don't care really what people are talking about. This is something that I've studied for a very long time. I sent you my document on it. I've got a lot of information. I've got a lot of sources there. Anybody who's watching, if you guys want to go to my description, I've got the document in the description that you can look at. But it is, I understand that there are crazies on both sides of this, but you just happen to be the crazy on the other side from the trans activists, right? And so I'm trying to
I'm not crazy.
Well,
none of my views
I'm saying
are
there
even
are extremes on both sides, and I would say that yes, to say that gender dysphoria doesn't even exist, you don't think that that's extreme to say it doesn't even exist?
No, we have no empirical data to show that it does exist. I'm taking a completely rational point in which I believe science and I trust scientists, and I know that we have proved none of this, and we don't know what the fuck it's doing. We don't know where any of this really comes from other than an ideology from a couple of men. I think that I'm taking a completely rational standpoint. I think the extreme position would be to believe any of this at all.
So
we have no empirical
BPD
data.
Doesn't exist, because this is similar to how we come to our understanding of most mental illnesses.
I think it's a debate whether or not BPD exists. I think, personally, I think it's more complex trauma, and I think that it's a modern day hysteria diagnosis. That's what I believe. But I'm not a scientist, so that's in my very humble opinion. But
so what about
everything that I read about this.
Do you feel the same way about most mental illnesses?
Well, we know that social sciences aren't exact sciences, so
of course,
yeah. So I would say that, I don't believe something like DID. I don't really believe exists because there's been no way to like really test it. We know that schizophrenia exists because we can measure it. We know what it looks like. People can describe it, right?
They can describe gender dysphoria.
No, they can't. When they describe gender dysphoria, they're implying that they're having discomfort with gender roles that are not innate. They are
But that's still
hold on. They're describing uncomfort with a political state of things. They're not describing something that is going on inside of them that would exist outside. And if you were schizophrenic, you would still be schizophrenic on a fucking island somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
If you could not feel, you could have penis hate. You could hate your body. You could hate your penis. You could hate your breasts on an island. Surely.
Yeah, but you're talking to somebody who doesn't believe that we can abolish gender.
That's body dysmorphia or body hatred. That's deep insecurity.
But you're talking to somebody who doesn't believe that we can abolish gender. So I also believe that the person who's out on an island would still have gender dysphoria regardless of the political state of things. I think that the body that you are in, like, they literally have dysphoria over their body parts. It's not just simply like the clothes that they wear. Well, yeah, I'm saying that, yeah, so then they would still have dysphoria on the island because
I'm saying they would still hate their penis on the island. But at that point, I don't even like calling it gender dysphoria. I would call that body dysmorphia or body hatred or deep insecurity, or there's what is the condition in which you believe you should have less limbs? It's
autogynephilia.
No.
Or hold on.
It's like transableism, but there's like a word for it.
There's body integrity dysphoria.
Yes, body integrity dysphoria.
Okay.
So that thing is like I think that's what that is. I think that's what that is, but with an extra element of like a political discomfort. I don't believe that there's any sort of, and also I believe in androphilia and autogynephilia.
Okay, so
I believe that those things are true, and I believe that they confound.
One of the things that I think, just like I brought up with the John Money stories, one of the things that I think disproves this is the fact that people who do transition, who are like a transtrender or something like that, but they don't actually have dysphoria, they end up detransitioning it because they developed gender dysphoria from transitioning. They ended up actually being treated as the other gender and being seen as the other gender, and it caused them to have gender dysphoria, which is why detransitioners have such like a hatred for transitioning, is because their experience is horrible.
I don't think that that's innate. I believe that that's because if I were to transition right now at 24, 25 years old, even though I don't feel like a stereotypical woman. I have autism. I have a more masculine brain. I have a more masculine personality. I don't like,
But you've also said you love feeling feminine. You love feeling like a woman.
But I surely love feeling masculine as well, because every personality trait I have plots normal distribution on a fucking bell curve. I feel all these things at once because everyone is non-binary. Everyone is their own person.
But that's why we say that it exists on a spectrum, is to say that, like, just because we put you into this box saying that you are a woman or that you're feminine doesn't mean that every single characteristic about you is feminine. It just means that overall we look at you as a conceptual feminine person.
Sure, but it does mean that I think all that means is that I'm a woman with varied interests.
Sure, but that's what, like,
but anyway, as I was saying, so if I were to transition right now, even if I was like a hot guy and I liked it and I was like, hell yeah, I've still had 24 years of practice being a woman. I've still lived most of my life as a female, as a woman. That would feel extremely uncomfortable to me because of how I've lived most of my life. When I changed my name, my stage name, and I have a unique experience with this. When I changed my real name is Kalia, but when I had changed my name to Lavender for like press and for my music career, it was very jarring. It was extremely jarring, and I didn't want my closest friends to call me Lav because it felt very uncomfortable because I had 19 years of practice being Kalia.
Yeah.
So it felt wrong. It felt uncomfortable. And there are times where I was like, oh, fuck, dude, this doesn't feel like me. This doesn't feel like whatever. But I'm not my name. I'm not my name. But it was just, I'd spent so much time with it that I was like, this is me. So when I hear that people detransition because I just don't think that the reason that people detransition is because they are really innately in their soul, like,
see,
or not in their soul.
In their soul, and because I don't care about the soul so much. I'm talking about biological characteristics. Like, you agreeing that there are all of these things.
What are some things that you think are biological characteristics? Because besides the clear ones, which are that women are the ones who conceive and hold babies, and men are stronger. I'm wondering what other traits you think are gendered.
Well, so the study that talks about the first 6 months of a child's life, like they do studies on their interests and like being interested in like hands versus looking at eyes or
Sure.
things like that. Okay, so these things seem to correlate with things later on that we would consider masculine, like watching sports or the way that we communicate or the way that we choose our friends. Like even men, in the way that they choose their friends, they just happen to like enjoy tasks that they share, like a common task, like playing fantasy football or basketball together. They're not really getting to know one another doing this, but they're doing it together, and that's why they start calling each other friends. Whereas women have to share like intimate details with one another in order to start calling each other friends. They have to build like a bond that's very different than the way that the males create a bond with one another.
So I would also say I would say that this is socialization as well. We have data from that same time period of 0 to 6 months of where people are leaving their female daughters to cry for longer. They're holding them differently. They're speaking to them differently. So I think it's really impossible to know which is which, whether it's nature versus nurture. But I would go as to say that like those things are probably way more socialization, because I think that like gay men are very. I often find that when I'm hanging out with gay men, it feels like I'm hanging out with a bunch of girls, and sometimes even straight men. I really think it depends. Like I said, I think that those things really do plot normal distribution on a bell curve. I just think it has to do a lot with your upbringing. As far as I really only think that the things that are innate and gendered in relation to sex are evolutionary. So a woman giving birth, and so the maternal instinct. But even then, that's sort of iffy because of how many women have postpartum depression and postpartum psychosis and end up wanting to actually kill their children. So there's that. But there's also, men, the wanting to fight rather than flight. I think that has to do with, muscle composition and aggression with testosterone. So I think that there are some things that are biological, and those inform the rest of our traits, the rest of society sort of, is that one sex has the child and that the other sex doesn't.
So
but otherwise with the communication differences thing, I'm like, I just don't believe that that's innate. I don't believe that that's evolutionary and biological.
So when I say something's biological, I want to be clear for it. Maybe you don't misunderstand this, but even for other people. So when I say something's biological, I mean that it has like a drive to make you more likely to do something, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to do that. So you can be socialized out of it, or it especially is going to. So I think with gender, most of the time, there's like a spot on the spectrum that you are like going to be naturally, all else equal. But like within socialization, now there's like a window where you can move from here to there on the spectrum, but you can't go from like uber super masculine like Hulk Hogan all the way to uber super feminine like a 50s style housewife. Like I don't think that you can move that far without there being like some real complications there, and we don't see it without real complications, right?
I know a trans woman who is like a 1950s housewife who used to be like a bodybuilder.
Yes, and she probably had gender dysphoria. Like that's kind of part of what we're talking about.
Well, I think she
without
had
serious issues. Without
sure.
I'm talking about serious issues, meaning like gender dysphoria is like the serious issue that either
there's also
dysphoria,
gay men. I mean, there's also gay men who, if you go to West Hollywood, all these men are fucking jacked and built, and they're still extremely misogynistic and very like toxic masculinity, hoo-ha. But they're also like going to drag shows, dressing up in drag, doing shit like that. So I don't know. I really think that this is all socialization and what we think is okay versus what isn't okay.
But the things that you're like talking about right now as exceptions for me are things that literally fit right into what it is that I'm saying. Like somebody who is a more flamboyant gay person just means that they're more towards the feminine side on the masculine.
No, these aren't. Well, I wouldn't even say that these people are flamboyant. Is what I was saying is they're still very macho, but they still like to do these things. I mean, autogynephilia is a term that exists only for men who are still attracted to women. It's straight men.
it's fun to be seen as something different, yes, but if people
Sure.
literally thought you were that different thing, not just that they see you differently or it's for a short amount of time, but for your entire life, people think you are this thing that's very different from what you identify with, that would cause problems for most anybody.
Sure.
Like, I think we all have like a need to be understood and a need to feel like people get who we are and they're able to see that. And I think a lot of people saw that with you, like first coming into the space and feeling misunderstood and feeling like people didn't get what it was that you were doing or what it was that you were trying to say. I think that
Yeah,
that is like
I have social, I have influencer dysphoria.
sure, but like
I have
it's,
push
I
pull
think that that is
dysphoria.
one thing that is very human, but then to
Sure.
take something that is almost innate to us. So like you mentioned gay people, we know that there's like a gene that correlates pretty highly with people who are gay. It doesn't mean that they are going to be gay, but it means that it is more likely that they are going to be gay, and that there are other social factors that can like affect whether or not they actually end up growing up to be gay. I think it's the same with our gender, is like we have a biological drive that is going to set us somewhere on the spectrum, and then our socialization is going to move us within that window on that spectrum.
Sure. So even if I grant that gender is real, what does that mean in the scope of societally cocooning it? Like, what does that? If so, let's say gender is real.
Mm-hmm.
Now what?
Okay, so the utility of language is to be able to see a pattern, label it, and then use the label to communicate it. If the pattern exists, we want to be able to label that pattern. Like we want to categorize it, label it, and then be able to communicate it. And that's what gender is it's our ability to communicate what it is that we see or the pattern that we see.
Okay. So that would be calling a man a trans woman, or she, her.
Oh, so that's a little bit different, but what I mean is like having the concept of what gender is. There's utility to having that concept overall.
Sure, I just think that we can call it something else. I just think that it's been so conflated into biology that I just don't even think that there's utility. I think just calling it personality would be much more efficient.
Maybe, I mean, personality
Or
is
even
something.
like I said, keeping it feminine and masculine for the time being, totally cool. I think it ought to, if we are going to have gender, it ought to mean feminine and masculine, not man and
Mhm.
woman.
Well, so okay, so that I guess we can move on to this part then. This is going to be the more difficult part of the conversation. But
Oh no.
so, all right. So when we use a word like woman, we are like communicating something conceptual. So you understand like you've heard about like the example with a chair, right? Where like we can't give a strict definition on what a chair is because then other things that we call a chair will not fit into it anymore.
No.
You've never heard this?
I have heard that, but I just completely oppose we can do that with biological sex. Like I just completely oppose it.
I'm not saying that we do it with biological sex. I'm saying that we do this with concepts.
Well, no, but yes, but woman is not a concept. It's a biological reality.
Right, but I don't believe that's what we're communicating. I think that's part of what we're communicating, but we're communicating much more with the idea of a woman. So if you said, hey, look at that woman over there, but it was Hulk Hogan standing over there, nobody would see who it is that you're pointing to because what you're communicating is something very different than Hulk Hogan. Even if Hulk Hogan happened to have a vagina, that's not what everybody thinks you're communicating.
Sure, and that would be, so if you called Hulk Hogan a woman, or if you called Hulk Hogan a man and Hulk Hogan was really a female, it would be a happy accident that you called them. It would still be untrue and an accident to call them a man if they were a female. It makes sense. It makes sense to have that offhand for sure. That makes sense, but it would still be wrong. And you can say things that make sense in a given situation, and they can still be wrong.
Sure. So if everybody says the sky is green in 100 years from now, like everybody says the sky is green, are they wrong, or did we just change what we call the color blue?
Well, we would have just changed it. But I'm more thinking of like if you see like a Dominican person and you're like, oh, that black person, but they have like no African in them, but they look black. Effectively, they're black to you, but they are not actually black. Do you know what I mean? Like, you would still be wrong. We wouldn't just call them black then after 100 years and it would be true.
I don't know.
We don't change the definition of what black is. It's just you made a happy accident, in which it's a happy accident in the case of, a trans woman being gendered the way that they want to be. It would be a happy accident, but it would still be false.
Well, so I want to be clear. I'm not here really to talk about trans people. We can use trans people to like test these ideas because they're more like along the extremes of these concepts. But I'm more so just talking about gender, something that literally everybody has, that everybody experiences. And so I'm more so just discussing like the idea of gender.
You think everyone experiences gender? You think everyone has a gender identity?
Yes, 100%. Yes, for sure.
Oh, I completely disagree.
I think everybody, if they were treated outside, so like I explained, like there's some sort of window that you can exist within, but I think as soon as you're treated as something outside of that window, you would start to develop dysphoria, for sure.
I just don't, in what scope, like the way that we're also, to even assert that there's a way that men and women should be treated. I just think that that's all social. I think that's all psychosocial. There's no innate way that you should treat a woman or you should treat a man.
I'm not really talking about the way that you would be treated. Well,
you just said if someone were to treat me like a man,
yes, but you're making it sound as like a prescriptive
If they were to be rougher
thing.
with me, if they were to be rougher with me or call me bro, I'd be like, that's weird because I've been psychosocially groomed into being treated like the weaker sex, right?
Yeah, I think that's
treated
part
like
of
a
it.
woman.
I think that's definitely
I
part
think
of
it's
it, but I don't think that's the
psychosocial.
whole thing. Yeah,
I think that's entirely psychosocial.
Well, and so this is why I would say that you're one of the extremes, is to say that it's entirely psychosocial. Like, I don't think most people think gender is entirely psychosocial.
Yes, but if you don't believe it's entirely psychosocial, then you would have to believe that there is like an intrinsic way of the world in which women are treated a certain way and men are treated a certain way.
No, not intrinsic. I think, again, like, you're making it sound prescriptive, where I'm saying like this is how you should treat them. I'm saying somebody would have problems with themselves if you treated them differently. That's very different than me saying you should treat them this way, right?
Sure, but someone having a problem with something, people are
somebody
finicky.
Having a problem with something is what explains that there is an inner identity. Not like, again, it's not, it has nothing to do with
if I were to get an ice cream cone and I asked for chocolate and they really got me pecan, was I supposed to get chocolate? Which is the truth? The truth of the choice, which one should I have gotten? Well, that doesn't make a lot of sense.
It does. So let's go back to the woman. Like, what it is that you're communicating is not just biology. It's not just chromosomes. It's not just gametes. It's not just a vagina. It is like an overall concept that you are like communicating when you say the word woman. Most of the time, the biology, the things that I just said, most of the time, those have no utility in you saying the word woman. I don't think
that there's any utility on calling anything that isn't a woman a woman. There's no utility for that.
I agree, but we disagree on what a woman is, so that's kind of a tautological statement.
What do you think a woman is?
Somebody who fits the concept of womanhood or femininity.
That's a circular definition. What is womanhood? What is womanhood?
Womanhood is femininity. Femininity is
what kind of things?
Like things that we would expect from a female.
So long hair, heels,
body language, facial expressions.
Okay, great. Yeah. Explain dyke lesbians.
Dyke lesbians are going to be farther
are they not
towards
women?
No, they are women. They're farther towards the masculine side on the feminine side.
So women can be anything as long as
I think anybody who would look at a dyke lesbian would call them women. That's the thing, is that like they fit within the concept of womanhood. They're just farther towards the masculine side of femininity. They don't look like a guy, but they are just more masculine.
But that's against your definition of womanhood as you just explained it. If they do not subscribe to womanhood, they are not any of the things that would mark womanhood. And they are still a female, and the only marker they have is female. Otherwise, they're completely masculine. They are not partaking in this facade of womanhood with all of these with all this costuming.
Yeah, I don't think a dyke
would not be a
lesbian is
woman
the same
anymore?
as like a normal male. I think that they are a lot more feminine than most males.
Okay, so what would feminine mean at that point? Their biology?
Some of it would be biology. So biology is part of the
Well,
concept.
most
Yes,
of it would be biology. I'm saying that if that's the only thing that's tethering them to womanhood is their femaleness and nothing else.
I don't think that's true. I think that like their emotions, the way that they communicate, the way that they carry themselves, there's a lot of
Have you ever met a
that,
dyke? They're
yes,
brutal.
My sister is a lesbian. She's married to a more masculine woman. Yes, I am well aware of
I
the
don't even
community.
I don't know, like even I think even what is his name? The porn star who's like in his 60s and is a trans masculine person. Buck Angel.
Oh, Buck Angel.
Buck Angel describes himself as a woman who wants to live as a man.
Yeah, sure.
Which I understand.
Nobody would look
I
at Buck Angel
being
as a woman.
I do.
But yes, because
Buck
you're
Angel is a
focusing on
female.
something that you don't actually see. You're
because
not
the only
communicating
thing-
anything at that point.
You are, because you also don't need to see. There's no distinction worth mentioning in the form of a stereotypical gender role that is worth holding people to. It doesn't make any fucking sense.
That's again, you're getting prescriptive when you talk about holding people to this. When you say
what about
gendered expectations are different than whether or not this is like the way that we conceptualize.
When you say womanhood, that means gender expectation. Womanhood. No female experiences woman. There is no womanhood in which every woman experiences. So womanhood is just
of course it's on a spectrum.
Sure. But so I just see a lot of holes in this. There are a lot of stretches, there are a lot of holes, and I think that is actually the opposite of what you're saying is supposed to have done, is to make things easy, right? That actually becomes, you have to jump through way more hoops to make someone a woman, to make sure someone is feminine. What does feminine even mean? It becomes this like long list of things that like you could or couldn't subscribe to. What I think a woman is someone who is of the nature to hold the larger sex gamete, which is an egg.
Yeah, but that's why we separate the terms, is because like the female and woman is because we can communicate two very different things.
The Oxford Dictionary doesn't separate them. Scientists do not separate them.
Pragmatically, we are communicating different things.
No, we are not. We should. When you call a trans woman a woman,
mm-hmm.
you are saying that with the right amount of fluff, with the right costume, someone can change their biological disposition, and they can't. A feminine man and a trans woman are the same thing.
I'm not.
They're the same thing. I'm saying that they actionably.
No, you said I'm communicating the same thing, and I'm saying that what you're actually communicating are going to be different things. So, like your biology.
What is the difference between a feminine? What is the difference between a drag queen and a woman and a trans woman?
Nothing, like in the moment, like them just being drag in that moment. Yes.
Okay, so then definitions lose their meaning entirely. So then your whole base of having something just be, well, this is what communication is for, is effectively mute. It means fucking nothing if so many things can be so many things at once, and there's no direct line, no direct definition, and most importantly, no direct political definition, which is how we make laws. So we can't make laws if we cannot define something. And yes, I believe that you probably think that women as a sex class or females as a sex class can be protected, should be protected.
Yes, but that's a very different thing. Again, like you're.
I don't think that's different.
I don't know if
that's
you're
where
confusing
your line of thinking
what
goes.
I'm saying. No, it's not, because if I'm talking about, like, I could say that you are assuming a lot when you say that. I could say that literally, like, bathrooms, changing rooms, all of this should be based on sex, and none of it should have anything to do with gender. And you're like jumping way down to assume that I have a whole lot more prescriptions than what I actually do.
I'm not even engaging with a prescription right now. I'm telling you.
You're saying that we can't make laws based on what it is that I'm saying.
When we describe, it is so. We can blank. When we describe, it isn't just to sit. right? We describe things so that we can take action on them. So when
Right.
I'm hearing your descriptions and I'm thinking about what that means for the future, right? So
No,
it's not
again,
even a necessary. I'm not saying that you are prescribing anything. I'm not saying that you ought to do that. You're saying that you ought to do something
no,
one
hold
way.
on. Please listen just for a second. You just said that what it is that I'm talking about will confuse things because then we can't take political action. And I'm saying you are assuming that I would think
No,
that we
I'm not
have
even
to
saying
take
action.
political action
I'm
based on
saying
gender
definition.
instead of sex.
No, I'm not even saying that. I'm not even forget the action part. I'm saying description. I'm
Yes.
also still in description.
But so then that would be based on what it is that you're communicating, what it is that is actually like tangibly there when you communicate
Sure.
something.
And so
That is
there's
what I'm
one
trying to talk
aspect,
about.
and there's one aspect in which we talk to each other just as people, and then there's another aspect that is laws, which are only communication. Laws are communicating with each other. It is a social contract in which we are
Mhm.
all communicating, right? So
Right.
a political definition is still a description. It's not a prescription.
Right.
So if you cannot have a political description where you can classify what woman means, and you're just like anyone, and then you do a circular definition that is anyone that subscribes to womanhood or feels like a woman, they're still so like, what the fuck does that even mean? What does
I want
that
to be
mean?
clear. I didn't say anything like that, so
You
I don't know where this
did.
is coming from. No, I
You
did not.
did.
No, I did not.
I didn't
I
pull it
said
out of
that
my
it is.
ass.
Yes, you did. I am saying that this is an overall conceptual thing that has like your biology will drive the concept that people view you as, and that it's like, and then it's also socially constructed, and you can be moved because of the way that you're socialized. But it is going to be overall a concept, and we engage with concepts in law all the time. There are all sorts of things that are conceptual, and this fits in just like any other concept does.
Not like identity. Identity is completely uncharted territory.
Sure, and so you're assuming
that
and what I'm saying is that we can still use sex based on some sort of like instead of using gender for an identity, we can still use sex and use that as like the way that we come up with like legislation or something like that.
Political definitions, yeah.
Yeah, sure, but like again, so what I'm saying is that what you're communicating, you would lose utility if it's only based on the biological, whereas I'm saying the biological is part of what you're communicating, but there's a whole lot more there that you're communicating as well. And if the biological doesn't match what you see on the outside, yet you're still using the word woman, most people would say that you're wrong because they see something different than what it is that you're talking about.
Okay, but they wouldn't be actually wrong. Like,
see, you say actually, and that's what I'm saying is what you are communicating is what is actual. That is the thing. What you communicate is what it actually means.
Well, that's sort of like, I mean, that's just like you're putting me in like a Schrodinger's box situation where like
I'm not. Okay, let me explain. So a definition, like definitions, we get them based on colloquial usage, right? That's how we come up with a definition. So the way that something is used or the way that something is communicated.
In most cases, like table. In most cases, like table. But then there are other things that are truths that we make up names for, right? So there is one human being, we've called it human. There is one being, terrestrial being that can produce egg, which we have named egg, the larger sex gamete, which we have named egg, and its male counterpart, which we have named male. That is a truth. So we can call it whatever we want. There are different names, there are different languages. They call people something different. Yes, and they call it something else, in different languages. Like in Spanish, it's something else. And in Portuguese, it's something else. It's actually probably the same thing in Portuguese and Spanish or similar. But
the way that we've determined whether or not something is a woman has changed, though. Like, but the word "woman" comes from.
But from the perspective, I'm gonna hit you with this. When you say that's just the way it is, I just fundamentally disagree that it's the way that should be. I'm sorry. That does women.
So what do you mean?
That does women and females a disservice to have a circular definition of womanhood.
It's not circular. It's not circular at all.
It is exactly. You cannot have what you are describing, the word that you are describing in the definition in the second part in the description.
Hold on.
You literally did. You said that being a woman was someone who felt that they identified with womanhood.
No,
That
is not what I said. That is not what I said. I did not bring up identity at any point. Listen, you have my document. You can literally read my definition.
Then what is a woman?
It is somebody who fits the concept of like femininity, and femininity is something expected from a female. This is not circular whatsoever. It is very linear.
So you're saying what is expected of? I'm sorry, I don't want to have a definition like that.
That's a pattern. That is a pattern. You see the pattern.
But that's all
it comes with expectations.
That's all socialization. These are things that have been imposed on women. Femininity has been imposed on women. Say that, why can't you just say at that point that woman is female? Why can't you just say that woman is female? Because if you're saying that these are things that have been imposed on females, then you would just say that a woman is a female. You would just say that. But you want to include people who feel like women, whatever the fuck that means. Okay, so you don't think that trans women are women.
This is why I'm saying, no, you are saying that my definition has like an ideological reason behind it. And I am saying that that trans people have nothing to do with why this is the definition. This is like saying, hold on,
that's not the definition.
I'm letting you give very long rants. Please, you got to let me get through a sentence once before you start cutting me off. I'm letting you talk for a very long time.
You're silencing women.
If a lion has fur, just because every time we see a lion it has fur does not mean that a lion is fur. These are still two different things, okay? Based on what it is that we are communicating.
But a lion is still a lion.
Yes, the lion is still a lion, exactly. But it always has fur. So therefore, why not just call the fur lion? That would be ridiculous, okay? There are two different things that we are communicating.
We're not talking about the way that a thing looks. We're not talking about the way that a thing looks. You just used a description. You just used a scenario in which you would describe how something looks by what it is. I'm saying the opposite. We should not do that. The way that something looks should not be what makes it something. It being something should be what makes it something. You literally just made an argument in my favor. To be something, to have that reality is why we make definitions, not what looks like something. And if we do accidentally say that something that looks like a woman is a woman, we are still wrong. It is not actually a woman. It just looks like one.
Okay, I understand the confusion.
If you put a dog in a fucking hot dog costume for Halloween, the dog is not a hot dog. It is still a dog.
Yes. Okay. So this is good. Okay. So now I understand. So the utility of what it is that you're trying to communicate is what matters in that moment, right? So the utility of the communication, what is it that it gets you? In most circumstances, saying the word woman, we don't care whether or not she has a vagina. We don't care what her chromosomes are. We care what it is that we are able to communicate so that you see that we are talking about a woman. That is going to be based on what I'm talking about, not what you're talking about. So it's the utility of how you get there.
Okay, so you're talking about street slang versus language that we should be upholding. We don't uphold street slang.
No, we have concepts throughout all of English language. Like again, a chair is a concept.
Okay,
it is something that we engage with regularly.
Have you ever been around someone who, when something good happens, they're like, "That's money. Hell yeah, that's money." But the thing is not actually currency?
Right. 100%, yes.
So I understand what you're saying. Yes, I understand what you're saying. But I'm saying when you want to look for utility of language, the importance is to describe the closest things that we have to the truth, right? And then we have all these other things that we say because we're humans, right? And we're complex. If someone wanted to call Blair White a woman, I'd be like, okay, wrong. If I could tell, if someone were to call any trans woman, passing trans woman, a woman, I'd be like, okay, I would have no way of knowing. But after knowing their biology, them calling that person a woman, I'd be like, no. And especially
but you understand you're losing utility in that word then. You've lost utility.
No.
Yes. 100%.
No, because you're thinking that the most utility is in the slang of it. You're not saying the utility is not in the truth.
Is a chair slang? Why is it a chair slang?
It's not the truth.
So a chair is not truths. Concepts are not truths. That's what you're saying to me.
A chair is not a biological reality.
If I say I'm going to Walmart,
you cannot say that that a rock formation is plastic. It
Okay,
is not.
so if I say I'm going to Walmart, are you saying that I'm not expressing the truth because really I'm going inside of a brick building that sells things? I just called it Walmart, and the Walmart is a concept that's not a real thing.
Well,
So
no, well, you're going into a store.
right, and what is that store?
The store is something that we call Walmart, but the truth,
Exactly.
it could have. Okay, but that's
So
not. That's
get
also
rid of the
not a
word Walmart then.
That's not a biological truth.
I'm not nobody's communicating
Stores are
biology.
not.
That's kind of the point. Is
No,
what I'm getting at
biology
is we
is
aren't
important when we
communicating
call
it.
things woman or man.
See, you're the one who has an ideological bent as to why you want it to mean this thing, whereas I'm
Want
saying
it to? Okay.
yes, I'm saying we
Okay,
use this is how we come to definitions of
I'll
words,
engage.
and I'm using the
Yes.
same process for everything.
Okay.
And you're saying, well, I don't want it
I
to
get what
mean
you're.
that thing.
No, I get what you're getting at. Words mean nothing, and they're
That's
just
not what I'm saying.
they're just colloquial usage, and we're just having fun. We're just a couple of guys having fun, and nothing is really that important. And we're just
There's no
in
objective
your reality.
meaning. Correct.
In your reality, words have no objective meaning. I'm not really here. Even what is consciousness really? I get
Woman
what you're
didn't
saying.
exist 100 years ago.
I
Yes.
get what you're saying, but that is not how we ought to use language, and that's not how. That's not how. That's like that's you're at by that point. Okay, anarchy, nihilism. Let's do whatever the fuck we want at all times. It just doesn't make that. Okay, you win. Nothing matters. Like that's where the logical conclusion of this goes to.
I don't think it does, and I understand why you think that. But so even the word woman came from with, which meant woman before, and then man meant human, and where meant man.
Yes.
Where and with. And then we made the word man mean it still meant human, but with man was now WIFMAN was now what we use to say it was a female human. So over time, like with changed over and over and over to communicate almost the same thing, because eventually it meant like the wife of a man to say wife, and then we created woman instead because it sounds like what with man, so we made woman instead to communicate the same thing.
So
and
so you think that female has utility though?
Yes, 100%.
But you think that woman has less so?
No, I think they both have utility in what it is that they're communicating.
But you don't think they ought to mean the same thing, and why is that?
I don't think anything ought to mean anything except for what it is that it's communicating.
That's word salad. I don't. So if woman and female do not mean the same thing, why shouldn't they? Because you're making the argument. You are making the argument. You are making the prescription that they ought to not mean the same thing. And I want to know why.
Okay, somewhat. So I'm saying that there is a process.
Because I think it has a lot to do with how you view transsexualism.
Sure. So I'm saying that we have a process for how we come to meaning of words and how we extract the meaning of that word. And I'm saying that we should always use this process to understand what it is that's being communicated. And I think that we should always use this process. And this is exactly how I would use this process to figure out what woman is, just as any other word.
Okay, well,
it's like a scientific process to understand meaning behind.
Okay, so you've been very collaborative here. I think that you have very long eyelashes, very beautiful feminine eyes. I think that you've been very empathetic during this conversation. I think you're a woman.
Okay. I think most people would disagree with you, and so you would have trouble with your communication in that area. If you called me a woman, most people would not understand what it is that you're saying. Just as if you called Hulk Hogan.
So if most people have to understand it.
Yes, that's what communication.
How do you measure that when you call someone something?
I don't think
if there's only the two of us, like we said, like this is just colloquial use. If there's only the two of us, what does it mean? Why do most people? So you're saying I'm wrong because most people would disagree.
Not saying that, yeah, kind of. So I'm saying that if Blair White was in this call, but we had never seen Blair White before, knew nothing about Blair White, and you kept saying that's a man, I think most people would not understand what it is you're trying to communicate.
Well, I don't think that that's true, but yeah, but I still, even if they didn't understand, I would still be right. it is a man.
See, that's where we have a difference. Is so I'm saying that there is no right outside of what it is that's being communicated and what
Okay,
it
so
is
when
that's
I
being
call you a woman,
understood.
it can be right.
It can be,
If
but
no
are
one else
you?
here if no one else here is watching, and I call you a woman, it is right
What is it that you're communicating when you say that?
that you are exhibiting traits that are feminine. Your
Mhm.
definition.
Right. And do you think that I, like anybody else, when you communicate that, would
That's
understand
not so
that?
anybody else. This is
Why
us.
say the word? Why say
This
the
is
word? If
Schrodinger's. This
I'm
is
talking
your
about me, I'm
Schrodinger's
talking
box
about me as
situation.
well. I'm
This is
talking about
just
me as well.
us.
I'm talking
Oh, so
about
you're
me.
talking about your gender identity, your self ID.
No, I'm not talking about identity at all. I would when you call
So
me a
you can
woman, would
disagree with
I
it.
understand what? No, when you call me a woman, answer the question, please. It's like the third time I've asked. When you call me a woman, would I understand what it is that you're trying to communicate to me?
Yes, I said that you have very long eyelashes.
Uh-huh.
You've been very collaborative. You've been very empathetic.
Mhm.
All very feminine traits. I
Yeah,
think
sure.
you're a woman.
Okay, so
By those definitions, because I'm sure that you'd think that most of those things are feminine.
I do, but I don't think that that communicates an overall concept. Just like I cannot lay out a number of things and say this is
So
what
you
makes
think
somebody a
that you
woman.
must look more like what we think women should look like.
I think that's part of it. I think so. Like there's
And I
weighted
think that that is
characteristics
a
as well. So
disgusting,
hold on.
stereotypical, completely shallow way of viewing humanness.
Okay, I'm not conveying humanness. I'm conveying like a pattern that we've recognized. So like if I see somebody who's walking down the road, okay, because this I understand the confusion. Like it sounds like what I'm saying is like it's almost like a math thing. You have 49 masculine characteristics, but
Yeah.
51 feminine characteristics. Now you're a woman. That is not what I'm saying. I'm saying that it is an overall concept that we can't put into words the way that you're asking me
So
to.
you're
Just as
biting
we
the
can't.
bullet
Hold on,
and you're
please. Hold on, please. Just as we can't do this with
I
a
have a
chair.
gun.
So if we see somebody walking down the road who has a like shaved legs, nylons, high heels, a dress, long hair, carrying a purse, but they got a big old bushy beard, like we have weighted characteristics where some matter more than others. So it's not a math game. It is an overall concept because that bushy beard matters a lot more to us than all of the other things added up
Yeah,
together.
so being female would matter a lot more than all of the other things, right?
Sure, but you don't see that most of the time. So you're not communicating that most of the time. So I can understand if you see somebody naked, the way that you envision them and the way that you conceptualize them would change.
Do you think
I can totally understand.
for even for trans people that most of the time you can probably tell what their natal sex is?
To some degree, yes, but it seems as though even accidentally, most people who don't want to will end up calling them by their preferred pronouns and calling them a woman and all of these other things because that's the way they naturally engage with the concept.
Well, because they also want to be respectful. I think
I'm saying accidentally. They accidentally do it. So they're not trying to be respectful. There's like tons of footage out there of Matt Walsh and Ben Shapiro accidentally saying she, her to trans women and then stopping and correcting themselves to say he, him instead because they naturally engage with them as women. Because
sure, I still think they corrected themselves because it was a mistake. So I think that you would correct yourself if you know that it's a mistake, even though your brain is playing tricks on you. But
so how do you come to your
also
definition?
think that that's socialization, right? Like I think that what you're doing right now is you're completely biting the bullet that stereotypically feminine traits would make someone a female, and I just don't think that that holds up. And I don't.
If you read my document, it talks a lot about stereotypes and how we come to understand concepts. Yes.
Yeah, I just don't believe that that should be the way that life is, and I think that in a technological age where the lines are blurring, there's going to be less and less utility because the way that we even described man was brute and protective and more muscly and hunter and aggressive, and with the technological age those things are fucking dying out. So what it means to be a man doesn't mean it fucking fuck all anymore. So it means just as little to women. I think that there are certain things
you realize
that are
when you say that
harmful.
you're saying masculine. Like all of the things that you just said when you said what it means to be a man, you are saying what it means to be masculine. That is what you're saying right there. And
Yes,
you don't even mean to be saying it.
no, I
Yet
did
that
mean to
is
be
what
saying
I'm
that.
saying that you communicate anyways is masculinity and
No,
femininity
no,
when
no,
you're
no,
talking about what it
I'm
means to be a man or a woman.
no, I'm still existing in your hypothetical world. So when I'm calling those
It's the
things
first
masculine,
time you've done that. I have trouble believing that you're saying this. Oh, I'm still doing it when this is the first time you've done it
I'm
so
telling
far.
you
But
that's
okay,
I'm telling you that's what I'm
okay. So
doing.
that you're
When
saying you're
when we're
okay.
talking about these things, because I'm more technological age progressive, right? So I don't think that any of these things fucking matter. In a perfect world, I don't think that we should assign any traits to anyone and within the span of gender or sex besides the ones that are important to reproduction, sexual
When you say we
reproduction,
shouldn't assign the
evolutionary.
traits, do you mean we shouldn't acknowledge the pattern, or we shouldn't like push that onto people?
We can acknowledge the pattern, but I don't think I, by acknowledge the pattern, I acknowledge for what?
To communicate it.
But every time you meet someone new, it's a completely different person. So
It
when
is, but the pattern still exists.
sure, but I don't think that you usually I think that going into meeting someone with bias, a black person would probably a black male on average would you would maybe be like this person commits more crime, I'm going to be a little scared, but you probably shouldn't feel that, right?
Yes, this is actually my argument. Did you see me make this argument recently?
No.
I literally made this argument to say why like your argument about the woman being so scared in the parking lot doesn't make sense is because we could be scared of black men because they commit more crimes and because they are bigger and have more testosterone and
Sure.
can like build more muscle, yet we still wouldn't say it's okay to like prescribe people to be afraid of them and treat them differently.
Yeah, we also wouldn't prescribe to think of them a certain way because of something that wasn't necessarily their truth. Because when we talk about things that exist, we talk about patterns of behavior that do exist, like violence. Those things exist. Those are material. Those are material realities in which we can experience them, and there you can empirically track them. You cannot empirically track gender identity.
Well, so when you say we wouldn't engage with them that way because that isn't their truth, I highly disagree that that's why we wouldn't treat them that way. And we wouldn't treat them that way because it's fallacious to say that this group does X, therefore this individual is more likely to do X. That is fallacious, and that's why we say that it's bigoted to like interact with people.
How are you
that way.
saying that? How are you saying that right now with your thoughts on gender and womanhood? I don't even. Are you here? Are you here? That is completely antithetical to what you just said prior.
It's
I'm
not
so
because
confused.
it's not. I'm saying that you shouldn't expect that based on the stereotype, whereas I am saying when you see an individual.
So what is your
you,
definition of woman? Again, sorry.
hold on, let me explain this because I understand why you're confused about this, but I'm saying that you are not you're not prescribing them to act this way, and you're not saying that you should be acting this way. Whereas if I say you're likely to commit crimes because you are black, that is fallacious. Whereas I'm looking at you and saying, looking at you, you fit this pattern, you fit
Okay,
this
you're
stereotype.
saying you're more likely to be a woman if you exhibit feminine traits.
I'm saying that that's how we would categorize you.
Sure, you are more likely to be a woman.
More likely to be a female, if that's what you're asking. Yes, 100%.
Yes, I would agree with that. I
Yes.
just don't know. You are more likely to be a woman if you engage in these things, sure. But there are you can still be a man who engages in these things and is not more like you are a man. Like you're a man. Like you are like when we talk about like if we have a pool of femininity and we say people are more likely to sit in the pool if they're women. I guess women are more likely to sit in the pool of femininity. They're more likely to do their hair, do their makeup, whatever. Men also do that.
Mm-hmm.
So the men would be in here.
Mm-hmm.
And that does not make them women. It just
No.
means they're feminine.
Yeah, just as if something has a leg, that doesn't make it a chair.
So they can even have all the stereotypes of being a woman and be a man. Drag queens. They could have it all and still be a man.
I would say most of the time in that moment, people would look at them as a woman. Now, overall, within their life, no, people wouldn't say that they are overall a woman just because in that moment they look like a woman. But like in the rest of their life, they present as a man and look like a man and engage like a man. And so we would say that they are a man in woman's clothes. And it's because we do think that there is like an essence to them that is in the woman's clothes.
What is the essence? Would that be
biology?
A soul?
No. Well, so
I don't know what this essence is. What do you mean this essence?
Wait, so I explained earlier that I think that like there are male brains and female brains. We can see the small differences. It's mostly the same, but we can see correlations up to about a 35 to 30. I think it's 35 to 37% across.
Wait. I'm glad that you brought up the brain thing because I've read a whole book on this. I've read the whole studies. I've read everything about this. The reason when people bring this up and they bring it up like we have tested children. They bring it up like we have new brains, and as soon as they exist before any socialization, we can see whether or not they're male or female. We can't. We have studied the brains of adults who have experiences, and we know that socialization affects a brain completely.
Mm-hmm.
In the same way, the same reason trans women and gay men have the most similar brains, more so similar than trans women and females, right? Because their experience matches that. We are talking about brains in the scope of having years of socialization. Socialization, I don't believe, is truth. And I believe that it's so subjective that we should not use subjectivity to describe things. I just don't believe that that's true, especially when there's so much at stake if we do.
But what you're talking about also has a lot of biological...
If you say that anyone can be a woman, you can say that, but you also have to think about what you are prescribing, about the conclusion of your definition. So when you think about the conclusion of your definition as to anyone can become a woman just by adopting feminine traits, what does that mean for females? What does that mean for women?
I'm not sure what you're asking, what it means for them.
Well, if anyone can be a woman, well, do you believe that males should be in female prisons if they're trans women?
Probably not, no.
Okay. Do you believe that males can compete in female sports?
Probably not, no.
Okay. So when we talk about definitions and the way that we describe things, we can exist in this happy little utopia world in which there's no consequences for that action. Unfortunately, every action that we take does have a consequence. When we call something a chair, someone's going to try to sit on it.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So we have to also think about what we are prescribing, even if it's unconscious, even if we don't want to think about it.
Yes. So when I say this, I'm saying that we are better understanding what it is that we're communicating. This is why definitions change, not just because what we're communicating changes, but sometimes we actually understand better what it is that we're communicating. And that's why there's like in linguistics, there's a lot of debate over man and woman. And I'm like coming at this from a linguistic perspective and a pragmatic perspective within linguistics to explain what it is that we're communicating. Not so.
Sure, I totally get that, and I completely agree with everything that you're asserting in the vacuum of linguistics.
Okay, but that's why I keep trying to ask you, how do you come to a definition? Here, let me finish what I was saying. So I also talk about the fact that like there is confusion because these words have been conflated for a long time, that like calling something a woman's bathroom now causes problems, or calling this the WNBA instead of the FNBA causes problems. And so I understand that those things cause confusion, but still the way that we come to understand a word should still be the same. We should just change the way that the other people are communicating it.
Sure. So I completely agree with you in the vacuum of linguistics, completely. If we are just putting blinders on and that's all we are talking about, I completely agree with you. And my prescription, or what I would say in this world, only talking about this, is we completely obliterate woman and just say female. Because woman to me means fucking. It's harmful. It doesn't. It's when you think about applying this word, which is what words are used for, is application.
Mm-hmm.
It holds no merit, weight. It doesn't. You can't make a political definition. You can't describe a female accurately in this definition. Any female accurately in this definition.
But you would use the word female to communicate that, though. That it still has a way to be communicated. That's the important part.
I would just use female. I would just say female.
That's what I'm saying, is
Yes.
that you would use the word female to communicate female while you still have an understanding of woman being different.
Sure.
I think I would feel differently if there was not the word female to still communicate that. I think I would be right where you are. But because we have the word female,
we have two words and one is up for debate. One is a little foggier.
Yes. And one is like more has changed over time and has been dependent on social...
Woman was not created. Woman as a word existed before gender existed. Like, woman just meant female. It meant the female. It meant an adult human female, in the same way that mare means an adult female horse.
Yes,
so
but
I'm
I think
confused
because
on where along the line did linguistics or you decide that women should mean something different to female?
I don't have a idea that woman should mean anything. I'm only describing what it does mean. Because again, I will say this for the fifth time.
What changed? When did it change?
You can't point at a time where a word changes. Just like when we started saying like cool, as in like I like this.
Changed with this whole gender identity shit. You know that it changed after this whole gender identity shit.
I know, because even what's her name? Like Judith Butler was talking about this without actually talking about trans people. She was talking about womanhood from a feminist perspective.
No, but that was not an application. She was talking about. She was using flowery language to say that a woman is not born a woman, that woman is a mask, that woman is a performance, right?
Yes, but she was talking about womanhood.
Yes, but it was artful. It was poetry. It was not genuine application and definition.
She's a linguist. She is a linguist.
Sure,
what are you talking about?
A linguist can still use
they can, but I'm saying that she is communicating the same thing that I'm communicating. I have differences in opinion with her, especially because
I'm not going to use definitions. I'm not going to use poetic definitions for definitions. Agree to disagree. I mean female when I mean woman, and I think that makes the most sense for real world application.
I'm not using poetic definitions either. I'm using pragmatic definitions.
That's not pragmatic.
It is, if that's what I'm saying is actually being communicated. That is the pragmatics. Pragmatic meaning in the section of linguistics that is pragmatics. Okay. Not saying like to be pragmatic. I'm saying pragmatics is a section of linguistics in a study of language, and that is how we come to definitions.
Okay. Tomfoolery, if that is your God-given name. If anyone can become a woman, if anyone can be a woman, what does that mean for women?
I don't know that anybody can be a woman. I think that if you are, again, I think you would develop gender dysphoria if you became a woman yet didn't actually...
With your definition, anyone can become one if they have these traits.
Yes, and
what does that mean for women?
I don't know I don't know. Again, you are the only one who has a political ideology pushing how you define these things, not me.
Okay, so you're just saying things to say things.
No, I'm saying this is how we come to definitions.
So you're arguing linguistic pedanticism.
No, I'm saying that this is I'm saying that I am being consistent in how I would come to the meaning of any word, and people who have an ideological reason for why they have a definition for a word are the ones who are being inconsistent. because they're going to use these they're going to look at what it is we're communicating to communicate things for literally everything else, unless there's some sort of ideological or political reason behind it.
Okay. I mean, I know what you're saying. We're just getting caught up on actionably real world application. Like I know and completely understand everything you're saying. I call my dog a baby. I'm saying you're so baby, you're such a baby.
So what would be the issue in real world applications? Like what's
it's not actually a baby. Is that the dog is not actually a baby?
Nothing is actually a word. The word is only communicating the
a baby
thing.
is not okay. Baby is the word for what we call an infant,
Yes.
offspring.
Yes.
What we call offspring, right?
Yes.
And it is not, my dog is not that thing.
Okay.
I'm using a word that does not mean, words can mean, I can call you fuckface.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't, you are not a fuckface.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
It's not, you can say, like, I know what you're saying. You can say anything to anything. The logical conclusion to what you're saying is that words don't matter and nothing matters, and that but that's not real. That's just, this much less interesting conversation than real world application.
I am talking about real world application deciding what the word means. You are saying you want the word to mean something based on the real world applications.
I mean, it's not even
we are going the
I
opposite directions. You have said numerous times that you don't want it to mean that.
Sure, but it's not just me not wanting it to. I just think that. Yeah,
this has been your argument the entire time.
Yeah,
yes, your whole argument. You just don't want it to mean that.
Yeah,
and so that's why I wanted to talk to you about this, is because I think, like, yes, I think generally we should have a system to come to understand what words mean, and we do. I just don't think that most people understand that. And so if they have
abolish women, women.
I
only
debate,
say female.
I debate.
And then the
self-ID
transsexuals are gonna fucking say that female includes fucking men. Males.
Well, I don't.
That's what they're doing now. They're doing that now.
Yes, but I debate them on the self-ID things the same, because they say all you have to do is say you are a woman in order to be a woman, and I come at it from the same exact angle to say that is not how we come up with the definition. No, so like if somebody's a Falcons fan,
but you're doubling down on that a stereotype can and should. You're saying a stereotype, not can. Because it can. I agree with that. But you're saying that it should change the definition of something. And I think that that's stupid.
Okay, so if we call something like somebody a Falcons fan, right? There's actually things that come with this. That if we walk into their house and they have Tom Brady up on their walls and a bunch of posters that say "Go Patriots," we would say, in order for me to call you a Falcons fan, you should have Falcons stuff up, not Patriots stuff. Falcons fans hate the Patriots. You cannot be a Falcons fan and have all of these other characteristics at the same time. But there's no line on like where you would stop calling them a Falcons fan and start calling them a Patriots fan. There's no way to draw that line. You just know that somebody who has all of this Patriot stuff up and no Falcons stuff up, you would never call them a Falcons fan. It's the same for all conceptual ideas. This is how we communicate them.
Okay. I get everything that you're saying. I just think that it ought to be different. Which, I get it. I do understand everything you're saying. And in the scope of, like I said, not thinking about real world application, I do completely agree with you.
Well, so again, what is like a complication with the real world application? Like, I don't think I've gotten an answer for that yet.
So I think that we should just specify, it should just be sex separatism instead of gender separatism. I think that because we have made
But that's not an issue with application.
We have made woman gendered instead of sexed. And I think that that's a problem because we don't know what the fuck gender is. We know what female is, right? So I think if we were going to make political definitions for something, then we should just get rid of the word woman entirely and just say female. If we were to say, instead of women being a protected sex class, it would just be that females are a protected sex class.
I agree with that. the problem with what you're saying is that this is why I say we cannot abolish gender, is we would still recognize that pattern, and that pattern would still exist, and it would still need a label so that it could be communicated, and we would still call it something. So then woman would just move to be labeled something else, but would still mean the same thing. When I say that this is how
Feminine.
like
It would
yes,
just
that's
mean
what I'm
feminine.
talking about. I'm talking about femininity. But there's a
Sure,
label
why
for the
not say
person who
feminine instead
is,
of woman?
because there is a label for the person who has feminine characteristics, right?
Femme.
Feminine is like,
There's
yes,
a femme and mask. You can just say that instead of woman and man.
you could, but that is not the label for the person. That is a label for a characteristic.
I mean, okay, dyke for women would be masculine. Lipstick would be for feminine lesbian. No, it'd be
Sure,
yeah,
but
like
you're still communicating the
that's
same
the
thing, and that's
words.
my
Sure,
point, is that
sure.
you would still in the end have the same exact outcome. You would just have a different label
Sure.
on it.
In this reality, I will concede in that woman just means fucking nothing, fuck all nothing, and that we should just keep saying female and male then.
I think it's what we're communicating most of the time. I think sex is part of what we're communicating. But when you say it means nothing, to me, it is most of what we mean.
Sure. I just don't like. Okay, like I understand the, but you realize that like most people don't have conversations this way.
Of course, but they depend on like authorities within linguistics to give this to them. That's why they
Sure.
yeah.
And if there was an authority that said if it changed in the Oxford Dictionary and someone said that woman meant feminine person, I'm sure most people would just move to female.
From what I understand, it currently does have feminine person as a definition, but let's see. But it has like 50 definitions now.
Yeah, the Oxford is an adult female. Merriam-Webster is adult or human female.
So I looked it up on Google. It's using the Oxford. One of the definitions is a person with the qualities traditionally associated with females. That is what I'm saying.
I don't even see that. But I believe you.
Okay.
But yeah, if that were to be the head definition, we would have a PSA, national PSA. Yeah, I wouldn't have a problem with that. I think it's the way that so many people conflate the two. Like when people say trans women are women, they're saying that they're equal to and the same thing as females. They're not saying trans women in a colloquial linguistic world, this is what is the most accurate. They're not saying that. They're saying it's the same thing.
Mm-hmm. But
and that's what I have a problem with as a radical feminist, as someone who wants to keep women protected as a sex class, is people don't care about the linguistic aspect. They care about, the more tangible thing that we believe is a woman, which is that, yeah, whatever.
Yeah, but I think if we understand what it is so this is part of the issues is like with self-ID people, they're starting to confuse what it is that we're communicating. And I think TERFs also confuse what it is we're communicating. So if we started using female, if we said female to communicate sex, and we're saying like, I'm talking about the sex characteristics, I want to help females, I want to help people, they're saying like with these chromosomes, these gametes. I meant to mention earlier, I don't mean to go so far back, but when you're talking about the differences in brains as adults, a lot of the time like that, you're right. It has a lot to do with socialization, but a lot of it also has to do with the fact that they went through puberty and their brain has had to adjust to either testosterone or estrogen. And so that makes like a massive difference. I think the reason that I still believe that we're born with either a feminine or a female brain or a masculine brain is because, or a male's brain, sorry, is because we don't understand the brain very well. And the only difference.
Wait, so if you believe in female and male brain, do you believe that a male can be born with a female brain?
I think that that's like generally what gender dysphoria is I think it's a biological thing.
There's no empirical data to suggest that this is true.
There's no empirical data to back up that anything is true as far as gender dysphoria goes.
Yeah, because it's not real.
Well,
But there's also in this, and I don't know if you're really big into philosophy. You seem to be more of a like math sort of, logic person more so than like head in the clouds philosophy fagging, I guess. Oop, I just had a full slur.
you're
But
fine.
okay, nice. But if this is the philosophical question, or I guess the bigger question is if a female brain, well, first you would have to, even if it were true that there were male and female brains, you would have to prove and explain how a female brain got inside of a male body
Hmm.
in a secular way, in a scientific way.
Yeah.
And you can't, and two, if there is a female brain inside of a male body, why would you then not just call it a male brain if it is inside of a male body?
Because if it actually has to do with the way that you present yourself, then it would change. So that like when you were talking about like the way that we see adult brains, there's only like 5 to 6 different areas that we're looking at, and then those correlations are only up to about a 30% correlation
Yeah.
on each one, and it's not even always the same like 3 or 4 out of the 5 to 6 areas, right?
Yeah.
So I would say that somebody who has gender dysphoria, the studies show that they have the same correlation, but it's still a low correlation. And so it would only, because these parts of the brains, like the way that we can categorize them, end up on such a wide spectrum, it would be very, very rare to end up with those same spots in a different sex, but it happens. So that's why it's only like a 1% chance that somebody ends up with gender dysphoria.
Sure. In the book I read, which I think is called Gendered Brains, I don't know, it's sitting on my bookshelf. Yeah, they also talk about how the difference between male and female is also as different as the difference between a large male and a small male.
Mm-hmm.
So then would you say that there is a small male brain and a large male brain? And then would you say that someone could have a small male brain inside of a large male?
Well, we adjust for proportions. Same with women. So we would say that men have much bigger brains, but they don't really once we adjust for proportionality to their body size. So it's the same between a large man and a small man. It would be the same thing. Once we adjust for proportionality, there's not that big of a difference.
Well, it's the same difference.
It is the same difference as far as size to the brain, but not as far as like the different parts of the brain being different.
Sure, but there's only slight tweaks in an individual's brain. Like, I think that you're explaining it as that most females have mostly different brains to males, and that's not true. Individually, brains are still very, very similar.
Yes, I'm not saying that there's a big difference, but I am saying that like the dendritic cells or like the synaptogenesis would be different, and those things can change based on like socialization as well.
Yes, but that's still person to person. So even saying that there is a female or male brain when they look so different, yes, but patterns is not what makes something so. So you could still, if something is a pattern,
what do you mean? That's how we categorize things, is based on a pattern.
No. So when you're saying that brains have that doesn't make sense for for how you're describing a female brain being in a male body. At that point, it would just be a male brain with different distribution of mass.
Yeah. Okay. Again,
it would just be a more feminine distribution of mass, or it would be maybe female-like if there was as much, if most females had this, which they don't.
Well, okay, so that is what I'm saying, is that like the brains overall for like 90% of the brains are the same, probably even higher than that. Like 95% of the brains are the same.
Yes.
But there's going to be the 5% that we're looking at for the difference. And within that 5%, that's where we can see. So like you said, like we can tell the difference between a male and a female brain like 80% of the time after they're dead. We can just go look and see their brain and tell if they were a male or a female.
But hold on. But that's usually because of size. That's almost 100%. That's almost 90% of the time because of size. That's not because of mass. That's not because of of dark matter in the brain. That is because of size. That is because we know what male brain looks like inside of a larger skull.
I don't think that's true. I think that
It
it's
is
based
true.
on I think it's based on construction and like what
You
like I
did
was talking
not
about like
read
dendrit.
gendered brains.
I read a lot of books on these things. So like even like do you know who Lou Ann Brizendine is?
Hold on, let me look up.
She wrote The Female Brain. Her book it like is very different from most everybody else's and is considered outdated at this point. So it's hard for me to like remember which book said what about which brain. But
Oh yeah, no, I have not read her book.
after I read, so it's mostly about like the changes to the brain once estrogen starts going into your brain. It
Sure.
talks about the differences from birth all the way up and how we can see these differences. It takes into account socialization. I'm trying to reach out to her to see if she'll come on to talk to her about some of these things. But anytime I read a book, the first thing I do is once I finish, go look for the criticisms of the book to kind of just block out everything that is considered outdated or wrong.
Okay, so you would say even in a male body. Like, what happens if this person has a female brain and is just gay? Or is like a straight guy and has like a female brain. Like
I,
even if I'm giving merit to the fact that there is a female brain and
mhm,
it is in a male body,
mhm.
why would you then not just call it a male brain and say it's slightly different? I don't understand that.
Because again, that is how we categorize things, is based on the patterns, that how something ends up in one category versus another
No,
category.
no. We actually would not. No, we would, because then you would have to explain how a female brain got into a male body. You cannot just jump without that. You cannot jump from female brain into
Okay,
a male body.
okay. Okay, I get it. When we say a female brain in a male body, that is what we're saying. We're saying it's a male's brain that happens to act like a female's brain. That is what we're saying. Yes.
Okay, so it's not actually a female brain. You're saying a woman. And
We
you're
don't think it got
linguistically, you'd be saying
transplanted or
a
anything.
woman
Yes.
brain.
Yes, we're saying something that is more
So
like
you
a
would,
woman's brain than a man's brain.
okay, so you wouldn't even be saying female brain because
Well,
it's not female.
I'm saying that it correlates with sex, and so it would be a female brain. But yeah, sure.
Correlates with, but it cannot be female if it is inside of a male.
Yes, I'm agreeing with you. This is what people are saying. I'm blown away that that's what you think people are saying. But yes, what you're saying is what they're saying. When they say a female brain inside of a male body, they are saying it is a male's brain that just happens to act like a female brain. That how we categorize things is based on the pattern. So if the pattern matches what we would call a female brain, we just call it a female brain. Obviously, the brain belongs to a male and it's in a male body, so it is a male brain. It just happens to follow the pattern of a female. What else would we possibly mean besides that? Like that somebody transplanted a brain or what?
Yes, that is having a female, or what you are saying. What you are saying right now is that it's a woman brain. By your definition, it is a woman brain. It has feminine attributes as according to female.
As I explained, I think that the like womanhood comes from your brain. Your femininity and masculinity are biological things that we can just see in like personality traits and things like that, interests and you know that sort of
So
stuff.
why is this a female brain and not a woman brain then?
It's both. But it's biological. We're
Well,
saying
if
that
it's
it
inside of a
aligns with
man,
the
it could only be a woman brain. It cannot be a female brain.
yeah. So if somebody had what is it like produced small gametes in a male body, we would say that they have female gametes. Not that they're like not. So it's the same thing. It is just that they match the pattern of what we would call it female gametes, right?
What? If a person can produce the larger sex gamete, which
Yeah,
is an egg,
this is a far out there like hypothetical where they have a penis, they have the same chromosomes, they have everything else, but they have they produce small gametes. We would say that they have female gametes, right?
Wait, what? Hold
No,
on. I
don't know what the I'm what part are you confused about here?
You said smaller gamete, and it's throwing me off. You said it's smaller and female. So females
Am
have
I?
the larger gamete. I'm confused.
Oh, okay, sorry. I did say that. Okay, so yeah, so if they had the larger gamete, then we would say that they have a female gamete.
Yes.
And so yeah, so that's what I'm saying is that like they could have all the male chromosomes, a penis, all of those things, but if they produce the larger gametes, then we would just say they have female gametes. Not because it's in a female body, it's still in a male's body. It just matches the pattern of what we would call female gametes.
If you are of the nature and capable of having a female gamete,
Again, this is an extreme
you are
hypothetical,
a
of
female.
course. But they have the same chromosomes as a male.
You
they
can
have
be
a penis
and still be a female. You can have a
You
penis.
can be a
and still
penis
be a female.
and
You can be a penis. You can have a penis and
What?
still be a female. There are intersex conditions in which you are still female.
Yeah, sir.
Have
Sure.
something that resembles male genitals.
Okay, so what would you say if they had just like the Y chromosome, but created the larger gametes? What would you say they are?
If you can produce an egg, you are a female.
Okay, so they have everything else male, but they produce an egg. They're a female.
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, different people define male and female differently. Some are based on genitalia, some are based on chromosomes, some are based on gametes, which is why this
I'm
gets
pretty sure
confusing,
the scientific definition of female is not. Denoting the sex that can bear offspring or produce eggs.
Mm-hmm.
So that has nothing to do.
But that would still
distinguished biologically by the production
well.
of gametes, ova, that can be fertilized by male gametes.
Yeah, but those
so that would still be a female, even
those
if
all align with
even
the
if
other
you
things
look
that we're talking
even if you
about.
look like a boy completely. If you have ova.
Okay, fair enough. Just take what I'm saying and assign it to
everyone else. I'm just saying that everyone else's definition is wrong. And when you hear someone trying to say that it's a bunch of different things, it's not. The chromosomes matching with the secondary sex characteristics, all of that shit doesn't fucking matter. It's whether or not you have ova or sperm. That is it. That's a scientific definition of sex.
Okay. Sure. Like the reason that they change it up is because in conversations about like trans people, they start to get caught in these gotchas about like, well, what if they can't produce eggs? Are they no longer a female? And like,
I love arguing that because those people are fucking retarded. If there's a woman who can produce, there's no male in the world who can produce ova. There's not one male in the world who can produce ova.
Mm-hmm.
So a woman who cannot produce ova is because she has a female-related disorder or illness, in which if that had a cure, she would still be able to. She's still capable of.
Sure. I don't think
a male would never be capable of that. So yeah. Yes, even a woman you can still produce ova even if you don't produce ova. A man cannot produce ova and won't.
Yes, but just a minute ago you were saying that a female is one who produces eggs, and so that's like yes, but if they don't produce eggs, that would mean that they're no
still capable, even if they don't.
They're apparently not.
No, they are still capable. They are still of the nature too. If their female reproductive system that was
I understand what you're saying.
Disordered was cured, they would still be capable of it.
I understand what you're saying.
Is not capable.
I understand what you're saying, but that just means that you're inconsistent on your definition.
That's not inconsistent.
That is inconsistent.
No, it's not capable of or denoting the sex that can.
But if they don't, they're not capable of doing it.
They still can, though.
How can they?
Because they are of the nature to.
But
if the disorder was if you could cure the disorder, in which a lot of cases you can,
So
endometriosis.
you realize that like this is like if somebody said like, oh, Tom can dunk, and I like run over and I miss the basket by a mile because I can't jump that high, and they're like, well, no, it's okay because he can dunk, he just doesn't. He's not able.
No,
he's not
that's not the same
capable
thing.
of
No,
jumping
that's
high enough,
capable.
but
Capable.
he can dunk.
No, that's not the same thing. He can. That's not the same thing. I'm saying if you are a human, you
Mhm.
should have 2 arms. This is
Mhm.
I hate that I'm having to do the Matt Walsh thing. I want him dead. You have 2 arms. Every
Yeah.
human has 2 arms. If you do not have, if one of them gets cut off in an accident, or you even have a genetic abnormality, you are still supposed to, or not supposed to, but of the nature,
That is what you're saying. You're saying you
of the
ought to have
nature.
this thing, and therefore what follows is that they would create eggs. And so if they ought to create eggs, then they would be a woman.
No. I'm saying that capability
But
in
if they don't do it, they're not capable.
that's not true. They just don't. If you're talking about
Okay.
capability, there's a capable that is tangible in the now, and there's a capable that is a truth, that is a biological reality.
This is just cope. This is pure cope.
No, you like don't understand this for some reason.
I
and it's
understand
like
what you're saying, but it means that you're just inconsistent on your definition. That's all
That's
that means.
not inconsistent.
Okay.
Can is 2 different things. Being of the nature to is can, and can being not doing it right now are different.
Okay, so
Both
how
can be true in linguistics.
Well, if they're capable of doing it, then why aren't they doing it?
Because they have a condition that affects their doing it in the now.
Okay, so a male just has a condition where he's not capable of doing it in the now.
No, he doesn't. They do not have conditions. They are not of the nature to create eggs.
Okay.
Why are you acting like you got a gotcha on me?
I'm not. I just don't. I don't want to get the gotcha. Is the point? I don't even because.
But you are wrong.
By definition, you are inconsistent.
No male.
You are
no
saying
male is capable of having of creating ova.
Yes.
No male is capable. Why is that?
It doesn't matter because when you say this is what I base my definition on,
women being capable and doing it are different, especially when you make the distinction between 2 sex classes in which one will never be able to and one can.
But is there like a surgery that you can get to fix that, or?
Yes.
Okay, and then once they fix it, then they would be capable of doing it.
Yes.
Okay.
They are still capable even without the surgery. It is just, are they capable in the moment? In the now? They are still capable. They're still of the nature to.
Okay.
Are you I feel like you're not getting it.
I get it.
Linguistically, if you study linguistics, you should know that capable can mean many different things. It can mean of the nature to, and it can mean in the moment, capable of doing it right now. You are capable of running, even if you have one leg. You are capable. You are of the nature to. You are not capable of flying because you are not of the nature to fly.
I understand what you're saying. You're saying that you have the other necessities to be capable of doing it. That is like you're saying that like you have the other things that make you to where you could be capable of doing it. Right?
You have the necessary material.
Yes, I understand. Again, I'm not.
And every woman have the necessary.
You are the one who keeps pushing this, not me. I'm saying, okay, I get it. I get what you're saying. I understand what it is that you're communicating.
Okay.
All right. Was there? I think we went over everything. I appreciate you doing the camp. That was.
Yeah.
Was it rough?
No, I'm feeling better after taking my my medication because I don't feel my hands as much anymore, but I was scared I was going to be wincing in pain, so that I wouldn't be ready. I was gonna just take it from bed, but I'm glad that I didn't. This looks more professional.
Cool. Yeah.
And I had more props. I had something I used as a gun.
You're sticking a lighter at me the entire time. That was a threat.
I was able to be more threatening this way, so that's a plus. But yeah, I'm so sorry for flaking so many times. I'm very finicky with my health issues. It's not you, it's me.
Well, you know, I started to wonder if it was me because there was a panel that we were supposed to be on together, and as soon as they signed me on, then you canceled like 3 times, and I was like, I don't know what it is. He
reminded me about that today. It literally had nothing to do with you. I was literally, you can ask anyone else. I'm just really hard to reach with my health issues. I'm just really hard to get. But
I understand. Yeah, I have a lot of health issues as well, so I get it.
That's why we're online. That's why we're online losers. But anyway, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
Later. All right. Talk to you later.